Thinking about buying a franchise? Then the How to Buy a Franchise show is just for you. Here's your host, Dr. John Hayes.
Now, what about the franchisee who's not maximizing their financial potential? What's happening there? You're teaching all the right things. What's wrong?
Well, sometimes folks buy a franchise and they really shouldn't.
Yes.
I don't know how else to say that. We work very hard in our franchise sales process to make sure that we're getting the right people who understand we have a proven operating system, but you got to follow it.
Yes.
So every once in a while you got folks that said they were going to do that, but then in fact don't. So we spend a lot of extra time coaching and counseling, making sure that we reiterating and re-promoting and making sure they understand the system. And then if they still can't or won't do it, we're encouraging them to sell the business to someone else.
Yeah.
We'll find a new franchisee to come take it over. Because sometimes if you have someone who truly isn't going to implement the model, you need to get them out. Sometimes folks who shouldn't have bought a franchise buy a franchise. You said early on in this interview that you got to first make sure that franchising is right for you. And how do you know that? You got to be willing to follow the franchisor's systems and procedures. You got to be willing to do that. This is not where you create your own wheel. It's where you implement the wheel very, very well. And not everybody can do that.
Yeah. They don't want to do that, or they think they can improve the wheel by tweaking it here or there, when the franchisor has already done this in most cases. So that's why I emphasize over and over and over, while franchising is powerful, you've got to make sure that it's going to work for you. And most people, I don't know why, just won't take the opportunity to do that. And what I find, one of the things I like, the Franchise Navigator is a very useful tool that through my books and when I write and speak, I tell people to go take the Franchise Navigator. I think it's a very powerful tool. There are other tools that are not exactly the same as that, and some franchisors have their own. Either they've created their own or they use one other. Maybe they use the DISC personality profile, which I've used for many, many years as well, because that's a good early indicator of whether or not you have the basics of what it's going to take to become a franchisee. So how much time do you spend on that before you sell a franchise? Are you weeding out people who aren't going to be a good fit?
We spend a lot of time in that franchise sales process qualifying the candidate. The financial qualification, that takes 5 minutes at the front. That's the easy part. And I can remember in the olden days, go back way, way long ago in my career, that was the only thing that mattered.
Yes.
But in the last 15 years, we've certainly changed that thought process, that it's more about the personality and the makeup of the person and their passion for the brand and their willingness to implement the model.
Yeah.
So we have a process where our Executive Vice President of Franchise Support and Sales, Mark Jameson, makes sure he has a personal interview with every candidate after our franchise salesperson has gone through a whole process with them. But we want to make sure we have a sales process and we can track that in our tool to see if the person follows the process of the sale, which is actually a test to see if they're going to follow the process of the FASTSIGNS operating system.
That's
because
great.
when someone doesn't want to go from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, wants to go from 1 to 5, back to 2, back to 1, and then to 17, we know that we have someone who's not willing to follow a process. As simple as that seems, it actually is extremely telling.
So that's your actual sales process to sell a franchise.
Right.
You're watching the behavior of the prospect.
Absolutely.
And how they're going through your process. If they don't go through that process in an orderly manner, then this is an indicator to you that they might be maybe too entrepreneurial.
Right, and another example, one of the things we want them to do in our franchise sales process is reach out and speak with, it can be in person or in phone, at least 25 existing franchisees. Why? One, we want to make sure they really get a sense of the business.
Yeah.
And when they say, well, I spoke to one, that's all I need.
Yes.
That maybe is an indication that they're not going to do the work they need to do in the marketplace when they're prospecting for new customers. So we really want an in-depth, knowledgeable franchise candidate that has vetted us completely, because we're vetting them, and we want to make sure that they're doing the right thing as well.
All of this has to speak to your success at FASTSIGNS. So when franchisors wonder, how are they doing it? Why are franchisees so satisfied? This speaks to what that's all about, that you are doing the basics of what a franchisor is supposed to do, and a lot of franchisors don't do those kinds of things. So again, congratulations to FASTSIGNS that you're doing these basics, because franchising is so powerful as a methodology, but it gets abused. And when it gets abused, we end up getting a bad reputation. So the IFA has to spend a lot of time fighting negative press about franchising. So often the media will publish an article about a franchisee who failed, lost their life savings, and it is a sad story, and nobody wants to hear that kind of a story. And nobody wants to think that it came out of franchising. But you don't always get the story, the full story, that, well, they never did what they were supposed to do, and the franchisor never checked to see if they were doing what they were supposed to do. So of course that's going to fail. People say, well, failure is a result of not having enough money, and I used to believe that early on in my career, but then I would talk to people who lost thousands and thousands of dollars. They had plenty of money. How could this be? Well, they didn't have enough money because they didn't have a system to follow, or they failed to follow the system properly that the franchisor wanted them to implement.
Right.
So this is so important for franchisors.
Can I say two things
Yes.
on this subject? Number one, I think high franchisee satisfaction is a very key metric, and that's one of the metrics I, as the CEO of FASTSIGNS, manage to. I want to constantly know that my franchisees are happy. We do that lots of ways. We do an internal survey where we send it to all of our franchisees, ask about every department. We have 2 outside services benchmark our satisfaction every year, Franchise Business Review and Franchise Research Institute. And then after any visit or telephone call, a mini SurveyMonkey survey goes out with just 3 questions to make sure that our franchisees are happy, whether it's an IT support desk question, a tech support question, a marketing question. We always want to know that we're doing the job. So high franchisee satisfaction.
Yeah.
My joke is I one day want to be known as the queen of franchisee satisfaction. That's what I want to be known about.
Wonderful.
The other thing is the reason I give my time to be on the board of the International Franchise Association, I'm now in my 7th year on the board of directors, is because I want to make sure that I have the opportunity to influence emerging franchisors, startup franchisors, to understand that the key is all about happy franchisees that make good money.
Yes.
And when you have franchisors, maybe someone has a great concept, it's whatever it is, it's a restaurant, it's whatever it is, whatever the service, and they think, now I'm going to franchise. If they don't understand what it takes to be a franchisor, they're not going to take good care of their franchisees. And that's why I am so active in the IFA, is to help influence other franchisors to really love their franchisees.
Wonderful.
Thank you for listening to How to Buy a Franchise Show. If you want immediate assistance, visit howtobuyafranchise.com to contact Dr. John Hayes for a free consultation.